Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. In June of 2022, the apartment next to mine was rented out to two young women, both graduate students. After they settled in, it became clear they had a penchant for parties. No big deal, except Canada was still dealing with COVID-19 restrictions at this point, and you were supposed to limit your social gatherings. But then again, to be young again, right? So I didn't really care at first. During this time I was working in healthcare. I work with individuals with developmental disabilities, but I volunteered for the COVID-19 response team, meaning I got called upon to tend to those residents who were sick and needed quarantining or were diagnosed with COVID-19. This meant pretty long working hours, and I spent about 10 to 11 hours a day at work, with a full-hour bike ride to and from work. Needless to say, I was exhausted pretty much all the time, so I wasn't looking forward to the noise from a party, but I'm pretty laid back and know that living in the city, some noise is to be expected. So they're having their party, and I can tolerate some noise and music. But this party was out of control. People shouting at the top of their lungs in the hallway, breaking things, the works. At about 4 in the morning, I introduced myself to the neighbors and asked them when they could expect their company, over 20 people, to leave. "Hey, I'm Alex from next door. Any idea when your friends might be heading out?" I asked, trying to keep my tone friendly despite my exhaustion. One of the girls, Sarah, looked sheepish. "Oh, sorry about the noise. We'll start wrapping things up now." "That'd be great," I said. "And if you could avoid having a party tomorrow, that'd be amazing. I have to get up at 6 every day for work." "No problem," Sarah nodded. "We'll keep it quiet tomorrow, promise." They promised they would keep it down the rest of the night. They didn't, and that they wouldn't have a party the next day. Plot twist, they did have another party, and then did another one the day after that. At this point, I had gone 3 full nights without sleep and was nearing neurosis. Every night I had talked to the girls, and every night they would be full of apologies, but nothing would change. I also felt terrible when I had to enter their place because it would be absolutely packed with people. And I work with some very vulnerable individuals at work who I wouldn't want to expose to COVID-19. This was still early in the pandemic when we were learning about the virus. Luckily, the weekend came and they went to their parents so I could recover a bit. Suffice it to say, I wasn't really liking my new neighbors. During the next few weeks, they refrained from big parties, but they would have a constant flood of people coming over during the night. And by constant, I mean constant. Their bell would ring 70 times a night, and people would always be coming or going. And those people would be drunk and loud. Our communal hallway is pretty much an echo chamber because it's all stone, and any noise travels throughout the building. Basically, I couldn't rely on getting sleep at night. It drove me crazy. I could only sleep Friday through Sunday because then they would go off to their parents or wherever. I couldn't grasp how they could know this many people who would always be coming and going. During one night, while knocking on their door to complain about the noise, I encountered my upstairs neighbor, Emma. We decided that we would have to join forces to get this to stop. Emma told me some crucial information. The reason there were people coming and going all the time was that they were using their apartment as a makeshift bar/hangout. During this time, bars were closed due to COVID-19, and all those students were using the big apartment to socialize. Moreover, across the street was another frat house with 5 guys living there, and that too was a secret hangout. So people would hang out at those 2 places and cross the street if they wanted a different atmosphere or wanted to see their other friends. And the guys from across the street would also come over 15 times a night. Most visitors seemed to be law students or affiliated with them. Basically, our communal hallway was just a part of their cafe space now. So we tried talking to the girls again, then we started to talk to the visitors. None of them had any sympathy for us when we were asking them to be quiet at 4 in the morning. One night, I confronted a group of rowdy students in the hallway. "Guys, it's 4 a.m. Some of us have to work in the morning. Can you please keep it down?" A guy with a backwards cap snickered. "Chill out, Grandpa, it's not even that late." His friends laughed, and they continued their loud conversation as if I wasn't even there. Most of them just laughed at us, as we were the pesky neighbors, no doubt. Even more of them were just so wasted that they didn't know what they were doing. So we started calling the police dozens of times. Most of the time they weren't let in, and police told us they couldn't do anything. We kept calling, as we wanted a record of our calls in the system. Canada was still under COVID-19 restrictions at this point, and what they were doing was fully illegal. Even so, police told us their hands were tied if they wouldn't open the door. When the police couldn't help, I turned to the next best thing. I'm a social worker, so I have no problems looking up information and calling around to look for help. This is what I did. Most places, student unions, police, city hall, were understanding but couldn't really do much. So I acted on Emma's suggestion and contacted one of the girls' dean. I sent him a polite email apologizing for bothering him and taking up his time, but explained that I had this big group of students from his faculty causing disturbances every night, and maybe he wanted to know about it since they were breaking every possible COVID-19 rule that existed at that time. Especially since Emma and I were about to go to the papers with this story, as secret lockdown parties were becoming a thing in the news at this point. This dean called me back right away, and we had a productive conversation about our problems. He assured me he would handle it. What he did was call Sarah, the law student, and her parents. Big drama ensued, and we finally got to sit down with the girls, and they finally sounded like they were sorry. Tears were shed, for which I had no patience, to be honest. We learned that the police had actually been inside a few times, and they were issued tickets for having secret parties. Those were $300 each, so I have no idea why they didn't just stop. We learned they were not happy because the dean had called them up at 11 o'clock and they were still asleep. I couldn't help but say, well, there's your problem. You're still asleep at 11 o'clock. I'm up at 6 every day, and you girls haven't been a bit understanding about that. So we got to feel a bit like we got our revenge and we got to vent, but we kept it relatively civil and parted on good terms, hoping that this would be the end of it and we could live together as considerate neighbors. But if that were the case, I wouldn't be telling this story, right? You'd think they would have gotten the point now and would refrain from making noise and partying. Well, you'd be wrong. Basically what they did was move to the frat house across the street and start partying there. There were slightly fewer people running to and fro, but the noise was still a problem, and we were now in the middle of another COVID-19 wave, and these people were meeting up in big groups like crazy, while I hadn't seen a soul in almost a year. Never mind the people at my work who were forbidden from even going to their own families. The whole thing was just ridiculous. Emma happened to film such a party across the street and had sent the clip to me. We were thinking about going to the press with our story, but weren't really sure if it would be a good idea. So I posted the clip of the party on the subreddit of our city to test the waters. It got quite a few comments and upvotes, and it seemed most people were also sick of people disregarding the rules and having secret parties. After some talks with Emma, we decided to contact the press and simultaneously go up a step in the university hierarchy and contact the vice provost who had the power to start up a disciplinary case against the students. This person is one of 12 vice provosts for a total campus of about 15,000 students, so quite high up. Things moved fast. Local news actually picked up our story from Reddit and contacted me, and we gave some background info. They confirmed with the police that cops had been called dozens of times to our address and across the street and weren't let in most of the time. We mentioned that the university was involved and that we hoped they would finally intervene. The next day, the piece was on their website. It went viral there, and got promoted to the sites of most national newspapers. Its headline was sensational enough, mentioning the dozens of times police had shown up, and also mentioning how healthcare workers were being kept up by selfish students. At the same time, the vice provost contacted us to take our statements, which we already had prepared on paper, and informed us they would investigate and could possibly start up disciplinary actions. Throughout the day, more reporters were contacting me, and we made sure to mention that to her and link the university to the published articles. The next day, while at work, I got a message from Emma that a film crew from the national news was at our doorstep. She declined to talk to them, and I would have done the same since this was getting pretty big now, but they made a segment anyway. And sure enough, that night at 7, there was my street and a short section about cops standing in front of a closed door a dozen times and the local press officer talking about the troubles of closed doors. The best part about it was that a student from the offending frat house across the street had let the film crew in and said on camera exactly what we were accusing them of to the university, that they had been having parties and didn't let the cops in and that they had done it multiple times. No idea what made him think that was a good idea. "Yeah, we've had a few gatherings," the student said nonchalantly to the camera. "Sometimes the cops show up, but we just don't answer the door. It's not like they can do anything." I watched the segment in disbelief, shaking my head at the student's brazen admission. Anyway, trying not to make a huge story even longer, The press coverage died down sometime later, thank goodness, and the disciplinary action from the university went through. Before the hearing, we sat down with Sarah and her roommate from our block and cleared some things up. We wanted to live like normal people together, and we tried to make some amends. Because we put in a kind of good word for them, they got the lighter end of the stick. 40 hours of community service and some probation. The guys across the street got 80 hours each, and each had to write us a letter of apology, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading every time I got one. The sad part is most of them sounded just like dumb young kids, but that was after getting called out on the news and being part of a disciplinary action. We never wanted to escalate things this far. Some noise is to be expected when living in the same building, and we were never going to go to these extremes for some expected noises. But these people went to the extremes, and so we were forced to do the same. For the rest of the year, a simple message on WhatsApp was enough to silence any noises we had coming from their apartment. "Hey Sarah, it's getting a bit loud over there. Mind keeping it down?" I'd text. "Sorry, Alex, we'll turn the music down right away," would be the typical response. If anything, I hope they learned that even very polite and chilled people can become very upset when presented with sleep deprivation and excessive noise. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd be telling a story like this, but here goes. My wife and I bought our dream home in a quiet suburban neighborhood about 5 years ago. We loved the spacious yard and the fact that we had an empty lot next door that gave us some extra privacy. Little did I know that empty lot would become the center of a nightmare. It all started last spring when I noticed some surveying equipment on the empty lot next to our house. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe the homeowner association was just doing some routine maintenance or something. But a few days later, I saw construction vehicles pulling up and workers starting to clear the land. That's when alarm bells started going off in my head. I immediately called up Brad, the president of our homeowner association, to find out what was going on. "Oh yeah, we sold that lot to a developer," Brad said casually, like it was no big deal. "They're building a new house there." I nearly dropped the phone. "What do you mean you sold the lot? That's my property." Brad laughed, which only made me angrier. "No, that's homeowner association common land. We can do whatever we want with it." "That's impossible," I sputtered. "It was included in the deed when we bought our house. I have the paperwork to prove it." "Well, our records show differently," Brad replied dismissively. "If you have an issue, take it up with the developer." I was seeing red at this point. How could they sell land that I owned without even notifying me? I hung up on Brad and immediately called our real estate lawyer to figure out what the hell was going on. After reviewing our deed and property records, our lawyer confirmed that we did in fact own that empty lot next door. It was clearly included in our property description when we purchased the house. The homeowner association had absolutely no right to sell it. Armed with this information, I marched over to the construction site to confront the developer. A guy in a fancy suit who introduced himself as the owner of the development company seemed annoyed when I explained the situation. "Look, buddy, I bought this lot fair and square from the homeowner association," he said. "I've already invested a ton of money in starting construction. I'm not just going to walk away because you claim you own it." "I don't just claim to own it, I do own it," I shot back. "I have the legal documents to prove it. You need to stop construction immediately." The developer rolled his eyes. "Yeah, that's not happening. I suggest you take it up with the homeowner association if you have a problem. Now please leave my job site before I have to call the police." I was furious, but I knew arguing further wouldn't get me anywhere. I stormed home and immediately called our lawyer again to file an emergency injunction to halt the construction. But the legal wheels turned slowly, and over the next few weeks I watched helplessly as they continued building the house right next door on my land. My wife and I were beside ourselves with stress and anger. How could this be happening? We tried confronting Brad and the other homeowner association board members again, but they either dodged our calls or brushed us off. It was clear they had no intention of admitting their massive screw-up. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we got our day in court. Our lawyer presented all the documentation proving our ownership of the lot. The judge seemed incredulous at the homeowner association's actions and immediately granted our injunction to stop construction. But by that point, the house was nearly complete. The developer was livid and threatened to countersue us for all the money he'd invested. The homeowner association tried to claim it was all just an innocent misunderstanding. Yeah, right. In the end, it took almost a year of legal battles to get everything sorted out. The court ruled definitively that we were the rightful owners of the lot. The homeowner association was found grossly negligent for selling property they didn't own. They were ordered to buy back the land from the developer at full market value and pay us substantial damages for all the hassle and legal fees. The developer had to eat the cost of the partially built house. Last I heard, he was suing the homeowner association to recoup his losses. Couldn't have happened to a nicer bunch of folks, if you ask me. We ended up selling the extra lot to a lovely retired couple who are building a much smaller, more tasteful home there. And you better believe we made damn sure all the paperwork was in order this time. As for the homeowner association, there was a recall election, and most of the board members, including Brad, were voted out. The whole debacle ended up costing the homeowner association hundreds of thousands of dollars. Our dues went up, but it was worth it to see those incompetent jerks get what they deserved. These days, things are mostly back to normal in the neighborhood. But I'll never again take for granted the importance of knowing exactly what property you own, and being ready to fight for it if you have to. You never know when someone might try to literally build a house on your land. The next one is a petty revenge story. Might be a little long, so I apologize. So for a bit of context, I, 24F, used to work at a sandwich shop, named after a public transportation, in my hometown when I was 19. My manager and I were working a shift together one day, and the lunch rush had just ended, so she was mostly confined to the back balancing the safe and washing dishes, while I handled cleaning the front of house and the line. I saw a woman approaching the store and quickly made my way behind the line and washed up. She came in with her phone pressed to her ear, and I was already on edge because of that alone. Customers who refuse to get off the phone to communicate their order are always difficult to deal with. I welcomed her and I asked what I could get for her. She said a turkey sandwich very curtly, then turned back to her phone. The entire time I tried to take her order, she would say rude, snarky comments on my occupation, and to just make the damn sandwich. How hard can that be? I swear you're all so stupid it's hard to believe you have jobs. I was irritated, but continued smiling, but I could no longer force it to meet my eyes. I asked her what dressings she would like, and she said mustard, and refused to answer if she wanted regular spicy and honey mustard. So I just put regular mustard on it after she angrily told me to stop asking stupid questions. I finished the sandwich, rang up her sandwich and drink, and I hoped she would just leave after she was done. Nope. She finished 2/3 of her sandwich and came stomping back to my register, slammed the sandwich on the counter, and started non-stop ringing the bell to get my attention. I set down the prep I was doing and put on the best smile I could muster and went back to my register. She yelled at me that I would remake her sandwich for free because she clearly asked for honey mustard and I put the wrong mustard on her sandwich to spite her. My manager butted in, having heard everything from me making this lady's sandwich to that point. She came up behind me and saw the woman had eaten the majority of the sandwich. She told the woman that she seemed happy with the sandwich and refused the remake. The woman then picked up her sandwich and threw it at me. Luckily, it only got on my jeans and apron, but my manager said she needed to leave or she would call the cops. The lady continued to argue that now her sandwich was ruined and we needed to remake it for her. My manager pushed me behind her and told me to go finish my prep. I'm only just on the other side of the wall and hear everything. My manager's boyfriend was a cop, so she pulled out her phone and called him and started telling him how one of her employees had just been assaulted by a horrible customer. I had met him several times and he was an awesome guy. Well, this scared off the customer and we went about with our day-to-day duties. I ended up quitting after a few months when one of my coworkers thought it would be funny to touch me with a cookie tray she had just pulled out of the oven. Fast forward to a couple months ago. I go to that same shop because I was in the area and a sandwich sounded good. I did a double take when I saw that same woman behind the counter and she seemed to recognize me because she looked like shocked Pikachu. We go through the motions of making my order, and at the register I gave her a big smile as I popped a $5 bill in the tip cup and say, "I hope you have a blessed day." She went red hot in the face when I did this and went to say something when my old assistant manager came out front. He saw me and got excited and started talking about his promotion and wife. When the woman went into the back, my friend started laughing about how he could hear the petty in my voice from the back, that he had to see the look on my face, and that our old manager would have been proud. My manager now works a decent paying job and married her cop boyfriend. I work a decent job as well, and luckily don't have to deal with customers at this one. As I would have loved to do something truly petty, I refuse to stoop to her level. I've heard to kill 'em with kindness my entire life when someone wrongs me, so I decided to try that route, especially since I know how rough it can be to work in customer service, and didn't want to cause this woman the same level of stress and anxiety she caused me. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.